Part 14. Chapter 48. Exit. They made a ragtag parade, hauling their way back to the hangar. Anakin took the lead, with Qui-Gon's insensate form draped over his arms. Behind him, Padme hobbled, one arm full of hyperdrive parts, other arm supporting Obi-Wan. Liz took up the rear, her remaining arm clutching some miscellaneous odds and ends. Their slow going was hampered even further by the ship's new incline. Corridors had become slanting hills. Stairways were almost impassable. With every minor shift, wreckage had started tumbling down from the rear of the ship toward the front. The air was full of intermittent thuds and stuff. Elsewhere in the ship, new piles were falling over. At last, they'd made it to the lower deck. Double timing it as quickly as everyone's various physical conditions would allow, they were now near the finish. "At this point, I say we wait things out until whatever this is stops," Liz said, pausing to engage her mag treads as an ominous groan sounded from deep within the Helios. "Bastards are probably bombing again." "It's not happening," Obi-Wan said, grimacing as a sudden dust of some particulate matter trickled down into him and Padme. "Ow, okay. Qui-Gon needs medical attention immediately." Slowly the droid's eyes faded down to blue. "Of course. My sympathies, sir." More than ever, the General hoped his message had been answered. If the coelacanth and its medbay were in system, Qui-Gon had a fighting chance. If not, they were fortunate she'd made it this long. She actually had the unique properties of a lightsaber to thank for that. If her wound hadn't been cauterized instantly, she would have bled out long before now. "Okay, so," he said, hopping to keep up with the woman keeping him upright. "Plan." This prompted an incredulous side-eye from Padme. Why even bother at this stage? "Oh, it's simple, I promise. The dancer has a escape pod, yes?" From ahead, Anakin shouted an affirmative. "Yeah? What about the fancy ship she came in?" "Do either of us look like we're in any condition to pilot it?" "Okay, I guess it's a stupid question. It's such a nice ship. If Bail is as sad about it as you are, he can bill me." Limping around a piece of laser cannon ordnance that had somehow found its way down here in the reshuffling of debris, Obi-Wan continued. "Once we break atmosphere, you get me and Qui-Gon in the pod and fire it at my flagship. Then jump to the nearest system." "Assuming your friends are even up there," Padme pointed out. "Looking on the bright side has gotten us this far." "Yeah, that's what I'm saying." Before the General could muster a suitable retort, Anakin called over his shoulder. "Hey, here's the hangar. It's coming up." And indeed, Obi-Wan saw, they'd hit the point of the first junction. "Be careful coming through, though. The ceiling's caving in. There's a hole up above you." A death moan sounded from the bones of the Helios. And all of a sudden, the deck had started to slant forward again. Obi-Wan felt him and Padme start to tumble. She managed to turn their fall into a long forward half leap before a tortured shriek issued from just behind them. When they turned around, they were staring at a near solid wall of junk, with, Obi-Wan discovered, what looked like a clone arm poking out near the top. And Liz was on the other side of it. "Oh, great," Padme growled. "Liz!" Anakin bellowed, turning on his heel and struggling back uphill. "Liz!" "I'm all right, Mr. Anakin," a muffled voice confirmed from the other side of the impasse. "But I am stuck. I'll have to find another way around, even if there is one. Oh, God. Sir." This last was distinctly mournful. Obi-Wan leaned far enough to the side to look Padme in the eyes. How important were the pots she was carrying? Chewing on her lip, she considered. "Well, strictly speaking, we don't need them. The patch would be more volatile without him, but it would work." "You two are worried about the spare parts? Liz is back there." "It's a droid. Build another one." Anger flared in Anakin's eyes. "Oh dear." Before the pilot could respond, Obi-Wan raised his hand. I'm sorry, Anakin, truly. But Qui-Gon will die if we don't get her out of here as soon as possible. And to be fair, Liz did screw us," Padme finished for him. "Skywalker, you tried your best, but she was always a terrible present." "I'm standing right here," came from the other side of the pile, the tone still blue-eyed, but veering toward offended. Obi-Wan could feel the frustration pouring off of his friend, but after a few moments, Anakin simply nodded, his brows glowering but resigned. "I'm sorry, Liz. Find yourself another arm while you're back there." "It's all right, Mr. Anakin." Her vocabulary abruptly snapped off. A moment later, and in a decidedly different tone, it continued. "Never did like you anyway, nerf herder." "We'll be back," the pilot said, the level of insistence in his voice perhaps protesting a bit too much. "I promise." "I'm too tired to feel guilty about this," Obi-Wan told himself, but he still felt a new twinge of it as they turned back for their destination. Section. Miraculously, the dancer's mag treads hadn't failed when the quartet finally arrived at the hangar. It was clutching on, at an angle. Padme had to admit, it was lovely to see the old girl. God, that angle's going to make for a fun takeoff, she muttered, scrabbling up the boarding ramp and exhaling loudly as the familiar processed air hit her nostrils. Anakin, make sure you strap Jin down. It would be just our luck if gravity fails again. On it, her husband called from the cargo hold. Obi-Wan, you want to fly it? Padme doubted it was possible for anyone's face to drop any further than Obi-Wan's face dropped. But the general's face dropped. It's best. Why do I get the feeling I'm not going to like it if I say yes? Well, unless you want to help me fix the hyperdrive. What? We're in a hurry, Padme said, heading for the engine room. This saves time, go. Not exactly safe, Obi-Wan said to her retreating back. What did I say? It's the Spice Dancer! She flipped the intercom before dumping her pile of parts on the floor, listening to the pained sounds of the Jedi hobbling up the ladder and collapsing into the pilot's chair. You mentioned the startup sequence. Anakin's voice gradually became clearer as he dashed up the ladder. Padme could hear it. A lot of systems aren't exactly working right now, so you won't have to worry about starting them. So that's the good news, he said in one vast run-on speed. Okay, hit those switches, then that lever, then that switch, then that button there. Then bring this to over there, hit that button, this switch, and that switch. Padme grabbed a wrench, then swore as the engine room floor canted into a sleeper incline. Whatever the hell happened out there to destabilize this thing, she barked into the intercom. It's getting worse. Skywalker, get... His frame filled the doorway. You rang? What about Kenobi? Shrugging, Anakin started rummaging for a hydro spanner. I don't know, he catches on pretty quick. Horror filled her gut like a lead weight. You're leaving him unsupervised? In confirmation, the engines coughed to life, filling the room with a sound that was half roar, half wheeze. Anakin tore a panel off the hyperdrive, which was partly recessed into the floor, and started digging. We're all learning new things today, dear. Come on, just go with it. After several moments of frantically unscrewing components in silence, the work was interrupted by a sudden rattling. The circuit Anakin had been reaching for slid down toward his wife as the dancer tilted yet further. She snatched it and tossed it back to him. How's it going down there? It'd go faster if this death trap weren't trying to burrow its way down into the core right now, Padme replied, picking up a pair of pliers and crouching down next to Anakin. Yeah, man, maybe lift off and hover, you know? Keep her level, the pilot said dryly, moving aside to let his wife twist off the circuit. It would speed things along. He must have sensed her eyes widening at him. He paused and looked up and said, Oh, come on. I think he knows me well enough to know when I'm joking. Section. Oh, I hope he's joking, the Jedi thought. But taking a look out the rear camera, he saw... it didn't matter. As the Helios slipped further and further downward, it was starting to wedge the edge of the hangar into the crevice it had blown into the cave rock. And if the slide kept accelerating, they'd end up blocked before they could take off, rendering the hyperdrive useless after all this. He scanned the control board, eyes skating over the dozens of buttons and switches and everything, and many of them were obviously rerouted elsewhere. There was no labels. Oh, come on, he said to himself. You landed a cruiser on a planet, you can twist a control yoke. Doing his best to wince, keeping his eyes open, the Jedi let his hands hover over the yoke. He glanced around. Slowly, he gripped it. Nothing exploded. That's a start. Asking the Force as nicely as possible to please just let that streak continue. He reached for what he thought he remembered as the repulsor control, punched it. A pleasing whir started up. The Jedi felt himself relax another fraction. And that, he thought, eyes landing on a large lever low on the dashboard, is to disengage the landing gear. Stop, the Force whispered. The Helios rumbled, and the deck started to slide yet again. Oh, shit. Everyone gripped, exhaled, tugged. The mag treads disengaged. Now or never, he thought, and nudged forward on the yoke. Oh, shit! The ship leapt up with a shriek of firing engines. No, Obi-Wan cried, hauling backward as hard as possible, and narrowly avoiding driving the dancer into the far wall of the hangar. A machine gun blaring started. For a moment, the Jedi was sure he'd ended things, then realized, no, that's the intercom. He looked for the likely button on the control board and punched it. Oh, it's fine, He was kidding! Padme roared across from the engine room. Another alert started to blare. The Jedi looked out the viewport and saw that the latest shift in the Helios' orientation had been enough to start gravity rolling irrevocably forward. Melted starfighter hulks were starting to screech down the deck towards them. Several crates started rolling end over end, colliding with each other and then continuing downward toward the dancer. Qui-Gon's ship hung on by its mag treads, a rock in the midst of a flowing river of debris. The collective avalanche was rolling toward the dancer's nose. Fast. A rapid clanking sounded from behind him, Anakin hauling himself up the ladder. Obi-Wan, what the hell are you... He paused, looking through the viewport. Go faster. Fulfilling this as best as he knew how, the general hauled backwards on the controls. The dancer lurched. Anakin collapsed backwards, gripping the edge of the hatch just in time to avoid falling. A titanic thud, followed by a blue streak of curses, was over the intercom. Missing the edge of the blast door by what seemed like inches, the ship vaulted in reverse, out into the hangar and into the cave. Out of the hangar and into the cave. Desperately assuming that pulling extra hard to the right meant a sharp turn, Obi-Wan did so, simultaneously attempting to figure out how up works. The dancer's nose tilted upward, affording a blessed glimpse of something that, hey, definitely hadn't been there before. Sunlight. I don't know if they've been back to bomb, but something blew a hole in that roof. I can take the controls, Anakin hazarded in an uncharacteristically small voice. If you need me to just finish repairs, the Jedi hissed through clenched teeth, the white shock of light growing rapidly larger in the viewport. Got it under control. At the last second, the Force pleasantly informed him that, no, wait, this angle was too steep. Ease down, right now. Wrenching the control yoke down, he felt the almighty squeal that vibrated the ship down to the roots of his teeth. He pushed back hard on the throttle. He pushed hard on the throttle, squeezing his eyes shut, despite every thinking part of his brain insisting this was a bad idea, and twisted back the other way. The squeal stopped. When he opened his eyes again, they were in the air. Shakily, Anakin hazarded, I think you took off the forward landing gear. Fighting his urge to vomit, Obi-Wan croaked, Go, finish. I can't caution anything else up here, I hope. As the pilot descended down the ladder, Obi-Wan's peripheral vision picked up a sudden flash on the sensor screen. Too far off for him to see what it was through the viewport. Honestly, even without the smoke, it would have been too far off to see. I better check, though. I don't want a bomber to run into me. What is this? The ship still screaming upward, Obi-Wan shot a quick glance at the sensor screen, and then froze, staring at it, and then looked back. The silhouette, hovering at the very edge of the sensor's range, looked damn close to that of a Z95. Section. Republic Archives. Escape Pod. Space travelers hope the worst never comes, but when it does, they make sure to carry enough lifeboats to get to safety. Escape pods are extremely short-range spacecraft designed to carry a few inhabitants to safety from a disabled or endangered ship. Typically, pods are fired by explosive bolts. They carry no fuel of their own and are not capable of controlled flight. Those who use them are advised to do so only in range of an inhabited planet or a nearby rescue vessel. Spacers frequently tell horror stories of those who left their stranded ships in an escape pod, only to find themselves on the surface of a deadly wasteland, or worse, floating endlessly through the far reaches of space. Hi, doggy. Chapter 49. Improvisation. Strangely enough, the more panic started to ramp up, the more Corinne felt herself grow relaxed. Well, let's take a second. I have since found out that's a guy with a trash can on a rolling thing, going across a bumpy asphalt parking lot. Strangely enough, the more panic started to ramp up, the more Corinne felt herself grow relaxed. The auditory sensor's constant trilling faded to white noise. Thoughts of her dead comrades retreated to the back of her brain. The boxy frigate's silhouette softened to a dim blur, even as it was turning toward the coelacanth. She just ignored it. Cool, detached, she lined up a shot on an incoming starfighter, confident she could splatter her lasers across its hull before it was able to do anything. Squeak, 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 squeak! The shriek of a proximity alarm sliced through her concentration, bringing back with it all the other sensory distractions she'd managed to block out. Her eyes darted up and right, and then widened. Swearing, Sawshark Leader hauled her control stick up and only barely missed being sheared in half by what looked like nothing so much as a rocket-powered piece of sheet metal. With as teeth-shakingly close as the collision had come, she wouldn't be surprised if she'd have to carry on Rin's tradition and paint over some scratches on her ship once this thing was all over. What the hell? She bellowed into her comm, struggling to reorient her bucking Z95 and locate her intended target. Sawsharks, anyone else see that? Wasn't one of those, crackled Garvin Dreas' voice, his normal drawl mildly peaked. Transponder doesn't match, and it looked like a patchwork job. Perfect, Kieran growled. What idiot local is joyriding in the middle of this cluster? Apologies, a clipped core accent said, rather breathlessly through the comm. I'm a general, not a pilot. Anakin, would you please get up here? Flying was second nature to Corinne, largely unconscious, as it was to all Sawsharks. But even so, for a few minutes, she just sat there, unable to fully process what she just heard. She sputtered, then yanked her Z95 back into action. When she finally spoke again, an idiot grin had planted itself on her face. General Kenobi? Taking a shot at a passing transport out of habit, she frantically punched her comm unit, bringing up the coelacanth. Commander Cody, I've got some good news.
Yeah, we got the message.
Maybe it was a trick of the channel's feedback, but Sawshark leader swore she could hear a grim smile in the commander's voice.
General, how are you?
A long inhalation could be heard from the general's end, followed by simply,
I've been better.
Section. Even as he spoke, Obi-Wan was stripping off safety restraints. With one last heave, he threw himself out of the pilot's seat. Anakin slid in and seamlessly pulled the dancer back into the semblance of a straight line. Never, ever again, the pilot muttered, moving his flesh hand along the control board as if to assure himself that everything was, still there. Ever again. You never, ever fly this ship. Ever again. Ever again. Z95 dipped by, wagging its wings in a brief salute. Hello, sir. Who's crazy enough to be flying in that thing with you? One of the Sawsharks inquired. Biko, it sounded like. Anakin Skywalker and Padme Amidala. Local color, Obi-Wan replied, blissfully free to simply sink back into the co-pilot's seat now, and watch pinpoints of light streak by in the distance, gradually growing larger.
I had to do a double take when I saw the IFF. Spice Dancer seems a little undignified for you, sir.
Yes, well, everyone has their surprises. Before the pilot could reply with more wit, Obi-Wan continued. Cody, what's the situation?
We've got some of their ships down, but the one that's left is gearing up to blow us all to kingdom come.
Cody's voice didn't carry much levity in general, but now it was downright tense.
Bastards are lining up to blitz the coelacanth, sir. Already cost our sum total of ARCs. All of them. We've sent for reinforcements, but they can't be depended on. Hell, we only showed up for you a few days after you called.
Oh no, Obi-Wan had seen firsthand what... Let's stop. Obi-Wan had seen firsthand what a blitz from a few small fighters could do to a capital ship. If an entire cruiser blitzed the coelacanth. Anakin. I'm open to suggestions. Huh? The pilot squeezed his jaw tight, considering. Together, he and the general stared at the viewport at the two massive metal shapes that lay before them, still the size of toys from this far away. One triangular and Star Destroyer looking, and sleek. One boxy and crude and not. We can't take out their hyperdrive from out here. How do we stop them? We'd have to blow through the hull to do that. Nodding, Anakin narrowed his eyes, then spoke into the comm. You've got to move your Star Destroyer closer to him.
We're already at a minimum safe distance. If we get closer, their turbo lasers will hammer our shields down within minutes.
Hey man, I'm just a thrill jockey, but I'm pretty sure I can do the math when the options are getting slammed by turbo lasers or an entire cruiser launching itself through you. Obi-Wan winced. Cody probably hadn't been spoken to like that in... ever. Before he could intervene, Anakin continued. If you get close enough right now, you'll block them from building up speed for a light speed jump. They'll have no room to accelerate. Gets you enough time for the fighters to come up with a plan. For a few moments, there was the hiss of silence. Then,
I don't like it, General, but unless you've got a better idea... No, do it now.
Do it now, Obi-Wan barked.
Roger.
In the distance, the coelacanth sublights started to flare up.
When you've got time, General, we could really use a restoration of the chain of command. In the flesh.
I'm inbound. Have a med team ready on the coelacanth. I've got a woman here who needs immediate attention. He took a moment to reach out to the lower deck, sending what strength he could through the force to the inert shape lying near the escape pod's hatch. Then he laid a hand over the comms mic, rose from his seat, and turned to the pilot. Anakin, get as close as you can before you fire the escape pod, and then you get the hell out of here. The other man nodded. Okay, you better get down there. Anakin extended his flesh hand. Good luck. Whatever. Damn it, Anakin finished. Okay, well, we got the attention of their fighters. He yanked the dancer into a starboard turn, nearly bowling Obi-Wan over. A clone starcraft streaked by the cockpit. The auditory simulators roared, then promptly died. Bang. Obi-Wan flicked a glance down at the co-pilot station. That was the shields. Anakin's flesh hand was already punching buttons in an attempt to fix that. What? The third hit carried with it a physical vibration, one that shuddered throughout the ship. Wait, Anakin said. That can't have been them. We'd be dead.
Yeah. And, the explosive bolts on the pod just fired.
Padme informed them over the intercom. She sounded vaguely impressed at the new catastrophe the universe had managed to throw at them.
Jin wasn't in it yet, so there's that.
Scar going white as he clenched his jaw, Anakin sent the ship into a spin and then thrust forward, blasting return fire at the Confederate fighter with the Dancer's single cannon. From behind, passing bolts of plasma flickered across his viewport. Okay, Anakin said. Is there a plan D? Obi-Wan could only stare at the two capital ships, still far off in the distance. The pointed prow of the coelacanth, swinging into the cruiser's path. He ran through his head the odds that Cody could pull this all off on his own. He watched the Star Destroyer get pounded to splinters in the future. He saw the remaining Saw Sharks going up against it one by one. A fate which maybe, just maybe, the Force could save them from if he stayed on this ship. But he was a Jedi, which meant that choice was no choice at all. I promised you two we'd be finished once you got me to the fleet. You've done that. Just make the jump. Get out of here. No! Not quite believing who had snapped that syllable, the general whipped his head toward the ladder. Eyebrows knitted, cheeks blazing, Padme Amidala marched across the cockpit and shoved Obi-Wan out of her way and took her place in the co-pilot's seat. No! She said in a tone of measured fury. I have not gone through getting chased by gangsters, fighting cave monsters, baiting an entire fleet, and then facing off with a dark wizard for you to miss your flight! She started snapping levers with enough force that it sounded like she might break them. Just go. Tell us what you need us to do. Knowing that his lower jaw was hanging down, but not sure what to do about it, Obi-Wan turned to look at Anakin. And the love in the pilot's eyes was bright enough to set the planet burning all over. Section. The rumble of the sublights, part artificial audio, part actual vibration throughout the Star Destroyer's frame, permeated the bridge of the coelacanth. Reyes, normally content to sit at her terminal near the rear of the command room, was instead pacing back and forth in front of it. She reached the end of her stride and looked up, eyes locking with Cody. The ops chief braced herself for whatever order. Sit down, Reyes, he'd probably say. But that didn't come. Instead, Cody shot the young woman a gaze that carried a distinct flavor of, I don't like this one bit. Rather than turning on a heel and resuming her pacing, Reyes marched forward toward the commander, close enough to whisper, This is crazy, sir. She was, of course, referring to the Star Destroyer's present course. The nearly kilometer-long Durasteel dagger was creeping ever closer to the one remaining Confederate cruiser. All the while getting absolutely pounded by the enemy ship's turbo lasers. You don't usually go for crazy. Cody shrugged. Yeah, the jockey's right. It's this or get blitzed. Not much of a choice. Right. Well, I hope it works, she replied. Any hint of amusement at the situation drained from the chief's face when her terminal began blaring a shrill alarm. Oh, damn, Reyes muttered, speed-walking back to her station while tapping the earpiece hanging on the right side of her head. Saw Sharks, we've got one more troop transport. It's launching from that last cruiser.
What's this about troop transport?
Oh, right, Reyes thought. Forgot he was on the channel.
Hello, sir.
I'm sorry. Hello, sir. They've been launching transports towards the planet. We managed to take care of most of them. They haven't established a groundside presence.
Yeah, we need to make sure they don't do that.
A second voice. Skywalker, the man accompanying the general.
You should launch your own transports and set up fortified positions in the caves now.
Reyes shot up a look at Cody, raising an eyebrow as she reached for her microphone's mute button. Are we taking orders from the flyboy, sir? Yeah, wouldn't be the first time, Cody grumbled, gesturing out the window at the dangerously close enemy cruiser. Jesus. One corner of Reyes' mouth curled upward ever so slightly.
I don't like it,
Kenobi said, interrupting this aside.
No, it puts our people at risk. The enemy fighters will break away and follow our transports down. Might even shoot them down. Yeah, that's good,
Skywalker cut in.
That leaves the cruisers open for us to attack it. The cruiser open for us to attack it. The transports will be fine. Just have your squadron act like fighter escorts. You want to attack the cruiser. Have you noticed their shields are still up? To bring them down from full strength, we need an ion weapon of some sort. The Dancer hasn't got one. The coelacanth hasn't got one.
As the argument between Kenobi and Skywalker droned on, Reyes fought to maintain her composure. She shifted uncomfortably in her seat, unsure if she should interrupt the general. But Saw Shark leader seemed to have no qualms about that.
We got you covered on the ion cannon thing, General,
Corinne said.
I think Roland modded his fire to launch ionized missiles.
Oh,
I'm all out of them, Saw Shark 8. I'm all out of them, Saw Shark leader.
Roland's voice called out, a note of dejection clearly audible.
Not a problem,
Skywalker shot back.
No, we'll take care of it with the Spice Dancer. You just launch the transports. Go.
Reyes glanced up from her console and spun around in her chair, once again meeting Cody's gaze. The commander threw up his hands in defeat and shook his head. Do what he says, Cody muttered. Launch the transports. Have Saw Shark escort them to the surface. Finally breaking into a grin, Reyes whirled back to her terminal and passed along the order to the Saw Shark squadron. Section. Padme rotated her head slowly, turning to stare at Anakin as she tried to process what he'd just said. Huh? She said as she flicked the cockpit's comm mic to silent. We'll take care of it? What does that even mean? I'm not sure I like where this is going, Kenobi muttered, head in hands, as he slowly rotated in his new spot, one of the dancer's passenger seats. Do you ever? Anakin asked. Here, he said to Padme, sliding halfway out of the pilot's chair and loosening his grip on the control yoke. Here, take the wheel. Oh, God, she thought, swallowing a lump that was forming in her throat. Padme Amidala thought herself she was perfectly competent pilot. But this was a space battle. Laser blasts were eating away at the Spice Dancer's already shoddy shields. They had a critically injured passenger on board. The engine room was a ramshackle patch job comprised of parts from no less than 3 different ships that were never designed to be compatible with one another, and one part that might explode. Competent piloting probably wouldn't cut it. Still, she reached over and clasped her hands on the control yoke just above her husband's. His grip, half flesh, half machine, then loosened as her own shaky fingers locked around the yoke. She slid into place behind the controls as Anakin stood and moved toward the rear of the flight deck. Okay, Obi-Wan, you're with me, he said with a confidence that his wife hoped he genuinely felt. Padme gritted her teeth as she guided the dancer into a gentle turn, away from the action. Okay, what's the plan here, dear? She asked, looking back over her shoulder. In response, a boyish grin flashed across Anakin's face. His smile seemed to glow. In her younger years, Padme had been drawn in by that look. Now she knew its meaning all too well. He had a plan, and she wasn't going to like it. We're going to strip some non-essential ship parts and use them to ionize the laser cannon. The creak of Obi-Wan's passenger chair quickly spinning around screeched in her ear. That sounds dangerous. It is, Padme offered through a clenched jaw before Anakin could defend his idea. If there's one thing that's more risky than adding parts to the engine while it's flying, it's probably taking parts off while it's flying, she said. And she snapped the dancer into a tight dodge roll, causing Obi-Wan to nearly fall out of his seat, then continued. We can't exactly power this thing down, man, and the only parts with enough power output to even make that work would have to come... Uncomfortable silence permeated the air of the flight deck as she trailed off. Obi-Wan's chair creaked again as he leaned forward. From what? The hyperdrive. An icy glaze locked out the forward window. Like I said, Anakin offered with a shrug. Non-essential. Oh, come on, Skywalker, we just fixed it. Yeah, and we don't need it anymore, Anakin said, voice rising. He's not wrong, Obi-Wan hesitantly added. We've got to land on the Coelacanth to get Qui-Gon to a medic. You could stay on board and hitch a ride out of the system on that. We've got plenty of parts you could use to repair... Padme whipped her head around to look at Obi-Wan. Don't you start, Kenobi. The general held his hands up in a surrender as she turned her attention back to flying. It's 2 against 1, I guess. You guys go get started. I'll try to keep us alive. Behind her, Padme heard the sound of the Jedi hurriedly rising from his chair and moving toward the access ladder. The arrhythmic steps of an injured man descending the lower deck echoed throughout the cockpit. When Padme heard Anakin take his first step onto the ladder, she spoke. Hey, wait. She could hear the slight whir of his mechanical arm servos, the breathiness of a barely stifled laugh as Anakin froze at the top of the access ladder. Yeah? What do you need me to do up here? Well... You probably shouldn't jump to light speed. Anakin? Alright, sorry. The grin on Anakin's face was evident in his voice, but it faded as he continued. Okay. Well, see that big box? Once the captain's figured out why the Star Destroyer got so close, he's going to try to move around and make room for a hyperspace jump. Don't let him do it. Just run interference. Herd him into place. Keep him in the Star Destroyer's face. Just make sure he's never got room to accelerate. She felt her eyes go wide. Okay. Are you sure you don't want to fly? Yeah, I can fly. You want to rip apart the hyperdrive with Obi-Wan Kenobi? Padme let her silence answer. Thought so. This time it didn't even bother to hide the grin. Have a little confidence, Padme. You can fly this scrap heap just as well as I can. Fly it. Go. Have fun. See you in a minute. And with that, he was down the ladder, leaving Padme in the cockpit by herself. She gripped the control yoke harder, and her knuckles began to whiten. Okay, she whispered to herself. Okay, Amidala, let's do this. Section. The cold metal of the Spice Dancer's cargo hold door felt strangely refreshing against Obi-Wan's palm as he pressed against it. The Jedi had leaned against the surface for support at first, but now he pressed against the hand to reach out to the unconscious form on the other side of the door. Anakin had strapped Qui-Gon's nearly lifeless form down, using the Dancer's cargo netting, and Obi-Wan had to admit his old partner was probably safer in there than anywhere else on the ship. As he stretched his senses into the cargo bay, the woman's shallow breaths resonated within his own head. He tried to feel her mind, to get a sense of whether she knew what was going on, but if Qui-Gon had any idea she was critically injured, she wasn't showing it. The unconscious Jedi radiated a sense of calm contentedness, as if she were somehow happy with their current circumstance. Strange, Obi-Wan thought. but I suppose it wouldn't do any good to correct the notion. He broke the connection with his old partner just as Anakin descended the ladder. The scrapper hung from a chest-high rung with his mechanical hand, a sorrowful expression forming as Obi-Wan turned to face him. Oh, you don't have to worry about her. She'll be fine in there. The cargo netting is one of the few things on the ship that's never broken. Okay, shall we get into it? Hold on, Anakin said as his feet hit the deck. He paused, looking for words. I wanted to say I'm sorry. If I had done something sooner, she wouldn't have gotten hurt. Obi-Wan frowned. What? No, you have nothing to apologize for. When I called out to you, I told you to leave us. If you had listened, she'd be lying there, dying in that wreckage, and I'd be dead. Without actively reaching for the other man's mind, he tried to pour as much profound gratefulness into the Force as possible, hoping the other man would sense it. I owe you, Anakin. We both do. No matter the outcome. Skywalker stood there silently for a moment, then nodded. Yeah, I guess so. He flexed his mechanical hand, then breathed deeply and motioned back to the engine room. Okay, let's get started. Section. Republic Archives. Ion weapons. Standard blaster bolts are ineffective against deflector shields and heavily armored electrical components, and are likely to completely obliterate the electronics on board for anything that's lightly armored. When the goal is to disable rather than destroy, ion fire is the tool for the job. Everything from the handheld ion neutralizer to the massive ion cannon designed for planetary defense operate on the same principle. Though ion weapons appear to fall into the directed energy class of weapon, they do not simply fire bolts of electricity. Rather, conductor coils within the weapon energize an electively conductive slug of ferromagnetic fluid. Each slug is roughly spherical and holds its shape and electrical charge in flight. When it strikes a target, the slug bursts, scattering charged energy across the target's surface. Ion weapons are relatively useless against infantry, as the plastic synthetic used in ablative armor renders the electrified slugs inert. Attempts have been made to create dual-purpose weapons that could function as both blaster and ion gun. To date, this has proven too expensive to implement in consumer products and has seen only limited use in military or secure industrial settings. The amount of energy required to ionize a standard laser cannon's bolts is far too great to be practically achievable on any meaningful scale. Final chapter for the day. Chapter 50. Patchwork. Anakin and Obi-Wan stood side by side at the entrance to the Spice Dancer's engine room, an eerie blue glow casting shadows across their faces. Well, this is certainly something, Obi-Wan said. He was, Anakin assumed, referring to the rather unruly state of the hyperdrive module as it sat there. Extra parts hung off the main core of it at haphazard intervals, like differently sized and colored parasites, and something that looked ominously like the beginnings of a crack running down the side of it. It's called a patch job, and I'm quite proud of it, Anakin shot back in mock offense. It's too bad we had to take it apart so soon. I was really excited to find out if it worked. What? You weren't sure if it would work? No. I knew it would work. Never mind. Gesturing to a storage cupboard on Obi-Wan's side of the room, Anakin continued. Okay, open that up, would you? We're looking for a big spool of power cable in there somewhere. The Jedi did, hoisting the object in question out of the cupboard onto the floor. Heavier than it looks, he panted, turning to face the hyperdrive. Okay, which parts are we taking off? All of it, Anakin said. He pointed at the spool of cable. That's going to be a big extension cord running from here to the midship. It's going to live on the cord. We just have to drag the drive into the galley and wire it back up again. Maintenance hatch for the laser cannon hides under the dining table. So, into the galley. You want to unplug it? Obi-Wan stared, eyes wide, mouth half open. Jesus, for a man who can face down a hive full of bugs without flinching, he really can't deal with anything. I can do it, the younger man offered, shoving past his aghast companion. That works too. He reached his mechanical arm behind the hyperdrive housing and gave a great tug. The gentle pulsing blue light that was bathing the engine room died, leaving only the harsh white of the overhead lighting. Okay, Anakin said. Get behind this thing, help me push it, all right? It's going to scrape a lot, it's heavy. Instead of doing as he instructed, Obi-Wan stretched a hand out toward the hyperdrive unit. With a slight creak, the drive floated into the air, stopping to hover a few inches above deck. Anakin chuckled as he eyed the floating hyperdrive. Are Jedi allowed to use the Force to do this kind of thing? Probably not, Obi-Wan sighed, a strained look crossing his face. It occurred to Anakin that the Jedi's injuries were actually probably causing him difficulty, even if he was lifting the drive unit with his mind. Desperate times, though. Don't worry, my lips are sealed, Anakin said with a grunt, leaning into the hovering hyperdrive and shoving it in toward the engine room door. Section. The fur along the back of Kresk Jalir's neck stood on end as a clone starfighter, god damn it, buzzed right within spitting distance of her cockpit. Sashark 7 was not fond of close quarters fighting at all. On the shooting range, she was most comfortable with a disruptor rifle from a mile away. Behind the control yoke, the Bothan prided herself on making excellent kills at the very edge of her targeting computer's range. Boom headshot. But today the mission called for more of a knife fight than a sniper shot. Kresk and her wingmate, Roland, had been assigned to stay up in space while the rest of Sashark, what was left of Sashark, escorted Typhoon down to the surface, the troops and everything. Their job was now to assist Kenobi's pilot friend in running interference on the one remaining box cruiser. Of course, they also had to juggle the handful of clone starfighters that had stayed behind to cause them trouble.
You know, when you get accepted into flight school, they never tell you about this crap.
Roland's voice crackled across the comm line.
The recruiting poster is always about, high-speed chases, aerobatic maneuvers. That's all good. They never tell you about herding giant death boxes. I signed up to fight bad guys. Now I'm playing Shepard.
Maybe you can shut up and fight some bad guys, Krisk hissed. Get that fighter off my tail, man. She was normally more accommodating of Roland's less-than-professional attitude, but right now she was way outside her comfort zone.
Gladly,
Roland replied. Kresk watched off her starboard wing as Roland's Zed braked hard, shot backwards, and snapped off a flurry of laser blasts at her pursuer. The clone fighter didn't go down, but the attack was enough to scare it into peeling away. Thanks for the assist, Kresk absentmindedly said into the mic. The Bothan pilot was more focused on the movements of the enemy cruiser, and the rust-coated abomination that was darting back and forth in front of it. Okay, the cruiser's banking to port. Let's get up on that side and force it back the other direction.
Copy. You lead, I'll follow.
Section. Okay, now, set it down. The hyperdrive unit slammed into the galley deck. Anakin Skywalker leapt back, covering his face. Obi-Wan lowered his outstretched hand, immediately bringing it into grasp at his ribcage. As the Jedi panted from exhaustion, Anakin hauled himself back up to his feet. Gently! God, set it down gently! We're lucky that didn't blow up, you know. Sorry, Obi-Wan offered, wincing in pain as he leaned against the Spice Dancer's dining table. Lifting it took more effort than I expected it to.
What the hell was that noise?
Padme's voice rang out across the intercom.
You didn't just drop a hyperdrive part, did you?
No, Anakin shouted.
Skywalker, I swear you're going to stress me to death. I should have made you write a no in-flight maintenance line in the vows.
Trust me, Anakin muttered, moving closer to the intercom panel. I'm not enjoying this any more than you are.
I find that hard to believe.
Children, Obi-Wan barked. Cannon! Right. Anakin shoved against the table, to no avail. He shoved again. He tried to move it. What the... His face reddened as belated realization hit him. Gravity. We bolted this down. Right. Wearing a very put-upon expression, the general withdrew his lightsaber. I've used this more times this week than I have in the past 10 years, he muttered, and then started carving through the table's legs. Clung. A few seconds later, it toppled, revealing the hatch underneath it. Anakin belt down, seized the latch, and pulled it up. Padme seems to be doing a good job. Compared to me, certainly. Yeah, there's a reason I married her. With a whoosh of compressed air, the hatch slid upward, revealing the upper cannon below. Okay. Now, if she can just keep us alive for a few more minutes... Something in Anakin's head whispered a sudden warning, and he yanked his hands back out of the fucking hatch. A second later... A shower of sparks leapt out from the hatch, spraying into the air in his face. The pilot could feel their heat scalding him, even as he threw himself out. Did you just fire the cannon? He shouted in the general direction of Padme's intercom. Section.
One of their fighters was heading right for our wingman, Skywalker. Frickin' sue me!
The woman's voice hissed through Kresk's comm. The Bothan frowned. Trouble over there, human?
Padme Amidala. Thank you, and no.
A sibilance of frustrated breath exiting through her teeth crackled over the connection.
But it looks like I won't be able to keep our laser running for the next little while. You guys are on your own. Yeah, we're used to it,
Roland said.
But thanks for the assist.
Then, directed toward his fellow Sashark.
Kresk, cruiser's going a little faster than I'd like. Coming around for another pass.
Copy that, I'm on your tail. She clicked her Zed into a tight loop, bringing the floating box back into view. On the face of it, it seemed like a ship this big should be easy enough for them to not crash into. Just pick somewhere where it wasn't, and fly there, and then fly back at it. But for all this operation to work, Kresk and Roland had to buzz the cruiser just close enough that it would get scared of a collision and then back off from them, all the while walloping at its shields with their lasers. Not exactly a cakewalk, even for a frequent barnstormer like Roland. For the Bothan, who tended to get anxiety in any close-quarters fight regardless, this was definitely a nifty way to get her heart rate up. Of course, they had a little bit of assistance, but the Spice Dancer couldn't really do much more than blunder around near the cruiser and make a nuisance of itself, especially now that its cannon was apparently off limits. Amidala knew what she was doing, Kresk had to admit. She didn't have the flair that this Skywalker had demonstrated in his time at the control yoke, but the fact that she could make that piece of crap follow a course heading at all was a bloody miracle. Finishing her loop with a brief snap roll, Kresk looked out the starboard side of her cockpit to see Roland Zed hanging there.
Shall we dance?
He asked. Let's, she said, and turned back to the Hulk, hanging in front of them. All right, Amidala, it's going to bank port when we come at it, so make sure you're lined up over there on the other side.
Got it.
Turbolaser blasts streaked by, too inaccurate to do anything but rattle Kresk's ship, but bright enough to make her wince. Oh god, oh god, oh god. She squeezed her fighter's trigger in response, scarlet darts of light splashing against the shields of the cruiser with flares of white.
See, Kresk? It's not so bad.
Playing chicken with Ren's deal, dude, not mine.
Just shut up and fly.
Yawning slightly... Sorry, no comment on that. Just shut up and fly. Yawning slightly to avoid another barrage, the Bothan watched her rangefinder steadily narrow the distance between them. She knew exactly how much range she needed. The behemoth's engines loomed larger, blotting out stars from the sky. Okay, 15 seconds to collision.
Guys?
Amidala's voice crackled.
It's supposed to bank in my direction, right? What do you mean? It's heading your way.
Oh, the bastards. The utter bastards. Why couldn't they have been cowardly and made this easy? Okay. Kresk eased up on the accelerator. Slow. Opening the window. Oh, God, 10 seconds. Come on, she muttered to the generic deity she kept at the back of her mind at times like this. Oh, you know I hate this crap. Just make him flinch so I can get out of here. 5 seconds to collision. Shit.
Okay, screw it. Pull up,
Roland said. Breathing a sigh of relief, Kresk happily pulled backward on her control stick. Nothing happened. Metal was still filling her viewport. Pull up! She was too close. The rangefinder on her Z95 must have had a fault on it. As hard as she could, she hauled at the stick, doing as best as she could to make a hairpin loop upward. She would have made it if the cruiser had been decelerating. Section.
God damn it!
Obi-Wan's heart sank. What happened?
They're not interested in slowing down anymore. One of your pilots just got clotheslined by him.
He felt the swell of grief and guilt he felt dissipate to the Force. He'd return to it when he had the time. Where does that leave us?
Hang on, I'm patching our other friend through. Hold on.
Roland's voice, dirtied by its journey through the main comm unit down to the intercom where Obi-Wan and Anakin were, was difficult for them to make out, but Obi-Wan recognized the fury in it nonetheless.
Get the son of a bitch!
What followed this was cut off by a loud squeal of metal on metal. The general winced and flicked his lance downward, where Anakin's mechanical hand ground against the workings of the cannon. Roland, repeat, I can't hear a thing.
I think Kresk may have done something after all.
A shotgun blast of static burst across the link before it stabilized again.
Back quarter of their shields had to absorb a hell of a lot of kinetic energy when she plowed into them. So that's where you're going to want to hit him with the ions.
Copy that. Anakin, how are we doing here? Well, the wires aren't making this easy. That was an understatement. Sprouting from a panel in the cannon was a veritable thicket of crisscrossing red and green. Many of the individual branches, tangled in knots, again, nothing labeled. Connections between the cannon and the drive had been made with a few, but there was a fat cluster of 4 or 5 wires still dangling freely. All of these need to be connected for this to work? Well, most of them just plug in. But these need to be soldered. The pilot looked up and grimaced. I kept meaning to replace the soldering iron, but we were trapped in a cave. I can't believe I'm the one who's about to suggest this. Well, I'm no engineer, but here. He pointed to his lightsaber. You realize how imprecise that would be, right? And that's different from anything else we've been doing. How? Opening his mouth to argue, the pilot hesitated, then shrugged. Screw it. I assume you're going to take point? Section. Commander Cody stood anchored in place at the front of the coelacanth's bridge, hands clasped behind his back. Beyond the viewport, the telltale green lances of a turbo-laser volley leapt between Star Destroyer and enemy cruiser. Though the two ships were trading blows at fairly even intervals, the coelacanth was losing. Shields at 25%, called one officer from the crew pit. Cody fought off the urge to curse at this. Down to quarter power, with no end in sight. No reliable way to boost shield integrity. Oh god, oh god. Cody had considered treating the Star Destroyer like a giant snub fighter, shifting all deflector shield power to the front of the ship as the cruiser was attacking it. But a Z-95 was far more nimble than a Victory-class warship, and leaving the entire flank unshielded was a recipe for disaster. No, what we really need is backup.
Commander, backup is on the way!
Reyes shouted from her station at the aft end of the bridge. Oh, thank God, Cody thought. Let's hear the details, Reyes. Manta made contact with the Republic Patrol Squadron out in the Outer Rim somewhere. They're coming. They'll be here in... Oh. Damn it. She trailed off. 2 hours. They'll be here in 2 hours. We can't hold it for 2 hours. Is that really the closest backup? Sounds like... Okay, what about Manta? It just left. Can it come back? Yeah, but engine trouble from the Blitz's hypermatter make has left them on their backup hyperdrive. They can head this way, but it's going to take 45 minutes. Damn it, thought Cody. We don't even have that. No. They wouldn't get here soon enough to do anything. We'll just have to hope that the General and his pilot friend can pull off whatever it is they're trying to pull off. Section.
Damn it!
What the hell is going on down there? Padme asked, swinging the dancer around the cruiser's communications spire, keeping an eye out for turbolaser flyer.
Technical difficulties. Nothing to worry about. Obi-Wan, I really needed that. Do you want to do this? Yes? It would have been nicer if I could do it with both hands.
You know what? I don't want to know. At this point, she and the lone Z-95 were simply tracing spirals around the cruiser, doing their best to slow it down without getting flash fried. The destruction of her other wingmate seemed to have convinced the clones they were better off just plowing through their enemies. Not, Padme supposed, like they needed much convincing of that, considering what their initial plan would have been.
How you doing, Spice Dancer?
The starfighter pilot asked over comm. Padme turned her head and watched him make another dive at the back quarter, indiscriminately firing his cannons. Oh, you know, it's been a rough week.
Tell me about it.
From the control board, a klaxon started to blare. She flicked her glance downward. Oh, great. Hey, what's your name?
Sawshark 8, if you're feeling formal. Roland.
Yeah, Roland, are you seeing what I'm seeing?
Assuming you're seeing the 4 starfighters that just popped up, yeah. I guess they want to knock us up pretty quickly.
4 red dots had emerged from the Crimson Hulk that was the cruiser's sensor signature, splitting off into 2 pairs. Padme dipped down, shooting under the cruiser and hoping she was close enough to scramble her own signature on the fighter's screens for now. Well, I'm very mop-upable, so if you could take point...
I'll do what I can.
Keeping one eye on the sensor board, she toggled back over to the intercom. How we doing, guys? Section. Getting there, Anakin replied, staring down at the metal cylinder he clutched in his flesh hand. Holy crap. He felt the idiot grin playing across his face, but he was powerless to stop it. Whoa, shifting his wrist slightly, he listened to the of the sky blue blade as it increased in frequency. Oh, it felt good. Almost weightless, like an extension of his arm. It would have felt better even if he'd held it in his proper hand. Alas, this was no longer ideal. Out of habit, he tried to flex the mechanical hand's digits, but only 2 of them obeyed. A still crueling streak of molten metal was all that remained of the other 3, ending roughly at the lowest knuckles. The amputation had come courtesy of this same lightsaber. Lucky for me, there were no pain sensors. He hefted the saber, his dismay at the loss of the hand being totally subsumed by the childish delight of this humming plasma ball. Or line. If I were Obi-Wan, I could really get used to this, though. The pilot felt his friend's disapproval before he looked up and saw it. Please be careful, Obi-Wan said, his eyes fixed on the blade. Anakin was about to tell him, that's pretty rich from the guy that just sawed his hand off, but he looked into the general's eyes and saw that there was a look there pretty similar to what he himself had felt watching the Spice Dancer almost get plowed into a cave ceiling. Plus, Anakin was pretty sure that feeling sorry about the accidental dismemberment was probably why Obi-Wan was letting him hold it. Sorry, I just... You don't know, man, but I've always wanted to try one of these things. How did you... Anakin! Fleet! Right. He exhaled and gripped the hilt tighter. Okay. How do I do this? Hold those in place. The Jedi extended a hand, and the remaining wires stood up to attention. A couple of them had been prematurely sliced by his own attempt at soldering via plasma. Anakin hoped they weren't vital. He would never have admitted it to Obi-Wan, but he couldn't tell just by looking. Slowly, Anakin lowered the blade toward the wiring. The tips started to curl as the lightsaber grew closer, as if trying to shrink back from the heat. Little more. Little more. There was a long hiss and the smell of smoke, and he instantly let his thumb slide from the activation switch. The blade retracted, the wisps still curling from the now joined wiring and hyperdrive. Did it work? Gazing at the saber hilt for a second longer, Anakin handed it back. Well, you can tell that it worked because we didn't die. The saber would have cracked the casing on the hyperdrive. But I figured it was better you didn't know that. Take this. The Jedi rolled his eyes. All right, Padme, I think we're ready. Section. Republic Archives. Shield generator. Before space combat, there were shield generators. The earliest shields were crude particle deflectors, used to stop spaceborne debris from tearing through a ship's hull. Ray shields followed shortly thereafter, to prevent potentially lethal energy from affecting starships. Now, of course, both shields serve a more immediate use, preventing energy weapons and torpedoes from destroying ships in space combat. Deflector shields vary in strength, ranging from the light models used on civilian craft to the heavy-duty generators used on the largest of capital ships. All shields are weak to ion fire. If enough concentrated ion energy is lobbed against any shield, it will be rendered useless. But the same is true of other weapons. If a shield is struck enough by anything, it will burn itself out and render the target defenseless.